What do actors like Steve McQueen or Clint Eastwood like Dirty Harry or just about any Western movie from the 60s, even I Love Lucy, what do they have in common with firearms? A lot more than you might think, and that's what we're going to talk about in this episode of the Range Minded Podcast. Stay tuned. I know that intro sounded a little bit odd and cryptic, but I promise it'll all tie together. By the way, welcome back to the Range Minded Podcast. I am your host, Steve Zimmerman, and I am grateful for you guys to hang out with me and listen to my antics. This episode I'm going to call The War on Guns, how the anti-smoking campaign is challenging your firearms rights. Hey, this is editor version of Steve. I got the title wrong. I said it wrong. It is episode 286, but the title of the show is called The War on Guns, how anti-smoking tactics are targeting your rights. That's the right words for what I was trying to say. Just keep watching the show. It's a good one. Maybe I'll talk to you in a minute. Bye. Because they are. They're the same tactics have existed since the 60s. And we're going to dig into them a little bit and help you see how these things all kind of are working together to attack you. Meaning the same tactics they used to demonize the tobacco industry are being used against you, the firearms industry, and your Second Amendment rights. Let's dive into it. I am old enough to remember going to restaurants and having smoking and non-smoking sections. I specifically remember there's a little family-owned restaurant that's been in the Idaho Falls area for many, many years. I remember they had a cigarette vending machine where while you were sitting out waiting in the vestibule for your number to be called or your name to be called or however they did it back in the day, you could buy a smokes for 75 cents or whatever they were. Yeah, I'm that old. I guess I'm a graybeard nowadays. And it's really interesting to see how things have changed over the years. And, you know, you look back and you see old movies, right? That's why I brought Steve McQueen and Clint Eastwood. And like the cool dudes always smoked a cigarette. You saw smoking in hospitals, and you saw advertisements in magazines and radio ads and TV ads. Smoking was everywhere. Then in the 1960s, things started to change. And stuff really started getting pushed back on. Yeah, that's right. In 1964, the Surgeon General created a report linking cigarettes to lung cancer. And that's when the anti-tobacco lobby industry, whatever you want to call it, really kicked into gear. And they fought full force, demonizing anything with tobacco in it. It was prolific. They fought really hard from 1964 all the way up to 1998, when something called the Master Settlement Agreement took place, costing the tobacco industry millions and millions, maybe billions of dollars, ultimately really almost crushing the industry out completely. Now, I understand this isn't pro-smoking. Like I'm not endorsing cigarette use. You can do whatever you want. If you smoke, whatever, that's fine. I personally don't like it. But if you want to smoke, cool, that's fine. That's not what this episode is about. But what I want to talk about are how the same tactics, the same framework on demonizing the tobacco industry and the cigarette industry, those same tactics are being used right now with the firearms community, whether it be a manufacturer or advertisements or you. All these same tactics are being used to demonize anything 2A. You know, fast forward to now, 2025, we're seeing these exact same tactics being used on you and me. I bet you if you spent any time on your socials, at some point, maybe even today, you saw some kind of anti-gun thing from whether it be Mom's Demand or Everytown. There's got to be something that you've seen talking about this health epidemic. That's a total cookie cutter tablet used anti-tobacco thing, that the same strategy they use from there. They start to demonize and point out and try to alienate gun owners the best they can. In fact, after I think it was Uvalde, which was tragic for lots of reasons, including some of the law enforcement response, but that's not what this show is about. But after the Uvalde shooting, they went after the anti-gun groups, went after Daniel Defense really, really hard, right? Saying that their advertisements are targeted towards young people to make them violent or to some effect, which obviously we know that is not true. I've never seen a pro-violence gun manufacturer's commercial. In fact, we don't see advertisements from firearms manufacturers anymore because of this very tactic. The other thing that they're really good at not sharing or partially sharing is Everytown always quotes 43,721 firearms deaths in 2023. They love the big number. Even though we talked about this previously, right? They don't share that nearly 60% of that number is suicides. Yes, that number in total is way too high. I totally get it. But they're manipulating people's heartstrings by not sharing the entire truth. That is an anti-tobacco tactic recycled and used against you and me. This anti-tobacco playbook, like I say, is being used all the time. Again, it's recycled from back in the 60s to the 90s and just being repurposed today. And I decided, thinking about how I want to share this information with you, I decided I need you guys to be able to spot when you're being manipulated with this kind of information. Again, it's being used all the time. And so I came down with a few different things a few different items or tactics that they use that I want you to be able to spot. The first one that they often use is they frame it as a public health pandemic or something in the public health sphere, right? They try to make this sound like it's a major problem for public health. There's a reason why they put public health in this conversation. That way they can incorporate things like the CDC or other organizations like that are concerned with public health. It gives them the ability or the traction to do things like this, to study public health crises. You're going to hear phrases like gun violence epidemic, right? They throw that out there. In fact, I think it was in Philadelphia. Yep, in 2024. I got my show notes over here so I can see what's going on. In 2024, some of the Philadelphia media, I don't know if it was one of the channels or what, they started to frame gun violence as this preventable public health crisis. And they really started pushing that narrative a lot. By aiming it as a health crisis, instead of focusing on the criminals and executing the laws that they already have to the fullest extent, they went the other direction, demonizing firearms and making the tool the problem and not the person using it. Philadelphia is not alone. California did something called Firearm Violence Research Center at UC Davis. They churned out all sorts of these public health studies funded by people like Bloomberg, churning out all these gun deaths like they were diseases, like it was a disease, like this prolific disease, just like you'd see on cancer deaths. Exactly the same way the anti-tobacco lobby did against big tobacco companies. The exact same way. By generating this public health crisis, it starts making the public see things a different way, thinking, oh man, this is preventable. This is totally preventable. Let's just take the guns away because they're causing all these deaths. That's what they like to say, is the firearm is causing the death when it's not the gun at all. Obviously, it's the individual using the gun. Even the Biden administration, which is not a big surprise, they increased funding to the CDC to look into gun deaths as a public health issue, like a pandemic type thing, all to manipulate data to also then in turn manipulate the public's perception on firearms, just like tobacco, like what they did with the tobacco industry. Exactly. The next thing that they're going to use to manipulate you are media, or is the media, whether it be TV, radio, internet ads, and pretty much everywhere on your social media. You're going to see hashtags like end gun violence or whatever. You're going to see these stories. I see them on YouTube all the time when I'm getting ready to watch a video. These tear-jerking stories about how guns took the lives of somebody that they loved. I agree. Death, murder is murder, and it should be prosecuted as such. But these stories, these hashtags, these ad campaigns are designed to manipulate how you feel about something. If we become emotionally aware and emotionally attached to a story, we are more likely to make an emotional decision. That is the purpose of these campaigns, and that is a definite echo of the anti-tobacco campaign. That's the same thing they used by creating these tear-jerking stories back in the day to demonize the tobacco industry. I'm not saying the tobacco industry is good, but what I'm saying is the exact same tactic with tugging at your heartstrings is just being recycled and repurposed and reused to manipulate you. The other thing that's really, really important to understand with these ad campaigns or with these hashtags or these short ads on YouTube or whatever you're watching, they are, it's not a one-off company. It's not a one-off thing. These are coordinated and very well organized. I'm going to say an attack. That's what they are. They're coordinated attacks on your rights via your emotion. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? It's not a one-off, two-off thing. These are definitely the main organizations that all work together to manipulate you. I.e., just like I said earlier, after the Uvalde shooting, the Federal Trade Commission under Obama, it was under Biden, not Obama, fixed it, and other politicians, they wanted the FTC to go after Daniel Defense for whatever advertisements they had out. These aren't ads that you would see on TV. These aren't ads that you're going to see on YouTube or Rumble. These were ads maybe in a magazine that not a lot of people were going to see. And what they said, just like I mentioned earlier, is that Daniel Defense was advertising to children and extremists to create the next mass murderer, basically. It was asinine and ridiculous. But again, this anti-gun group, including the politicians at the time, were just digging in to a private company over an ad campaign that had nothing to do with Uvalde. Now, it's important to understand as you look for these strategies that were used to kill off the tobacco companies, you need, as you're watching and listening and you start identifying these things, it's important to understand that we're not just standing idly by. The gun industry has something, well, yeah, I guess the gun industry, the 2A community has something that tobacco never had, and that is a constitutionally guaranteed right? The Second Amendment guarantees our right to keep and bear arms. That has come up a lot in these court cases and these other things that are fighting back against these anti-gun groups that keeps us winning. Because we have something that's constitutionally sound and proven. And it's important for you to understand that part too. Hey guys, while I'm doing this edit, I just thought of something I wanted to share. My friend Dexter Taylor is currently serving 10 years in state prison for not getting a permit. Basically what it boils down to. If you haven't heard Dexter Taylor's story, he was building self-made firearms, which is completely legal and has been legal since before the country was a country. He built these self-made firearms. The ATF and maybe a state task force in New York State noticed that this individual was making a lot of purchases from sites where you can buy parts and parts kits. They went through there, they noticed Dexter's name popped up several times, and they raided his home. The ATF later dropped the case. They said there was no federal case because he was not doing anything illegal on the federal level. The state decided that they were going to pursue a case with Dexter, and basically what it boiled down to was he didn't get a permit to have a firearm. He broke no federal law. The state laws that now exist on the books for self-made firearms and those ghost guns didn't exist when Dexter originally built these firearms. He never took the guns out of his home. They've never been shot. He never posted about anything online. They were strictly for him to build and to develop some things that he was working on to make firearms more efficient. He is an engineer, a tinkerer. The dude is pretty awesome. Long story short, he's a political prisoner, and we're trying to raise funds to help him with his appeal process, which is expensive. It costs about $11,000 to present your appeal with all the paperwork and everything, getting it ready to go. He's got a solid attorney that is very two-way minded, but all this stuff still costs money. So I'm going to share his Give, Send, Go at the show notes in the back, and I would really appreciate it if you donated to Dexter Taylor. He really is my friend. I guess I haven't physically spoken to him face to face, but I've got to know him before he was even sentenced to what it was, but I've known Dexter about a year. Good dude, an American, a freedom-minded person, an individual that does not belong in jail. So if you have the means, please jump to the show notes. It'll probably actually be like a pinned comment that has the link to his Give, Send, Go. If you have the means and the ability to share $2, anything, that would be awesome. I would appreciate it. Dexter would appreciate it, and Dexter's family would be extremely grateful for it. So I decided I'd throw that in here. This is actually a perfect spot to throw this in. Let's go back to the show. Some of these big pro 2A groups, like Gun Owners of America or Firearms Policy Coalition, even, yes, the NRA, who hopefully is kind of making a turnaround and riding their ship in the proper direction, they're still kind of pushing back against these anti-gun groups, whether it be their ad campaigns or some of their BS statistics. They are pushing back, and it's important for you to recognize that. And honestly, to be a part of it, you should be joining one of these groups, whatever one you feel like aligns with your 2A beliefs. That is very important. Along with these pro 2A organizations, we're seeing some monumental, groundbreaking rulings from the Supreme Court, like the Nysurpa versus Bruin decision. That was absolutely huge. With the Bruin decision, it took out some of their other criteria that they would, judge these cases with, the lower courts would judge these cases with, and brought 3 things to the forefront in order to make gun laws, right? It has to match the text, the history, and the tradition of the Second Amendment, which really should nullify a vast amount of anti-gun laws over the years. That helps the 2A community immensely, and that should give you a huge confidence booster when it comes to identifying these anti-gun strategies. It should give you some confidence and honestly some momentum to push back. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. There's also something called the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. Yeah, that's right. Let's try that again. I have to read it off of my screen because it's hard for me to remember this. Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. This has helped manufacturers immensely. Basically, what this does is it doesn't hold manufacturers liable for the misuse of their products. They're still liable if a product causes harm as far as a defect, like say something explodes in the dude's hand or whatever. They're still liable for that, but they're not responsible for any kind of misuse of their product. The same kind of thing exists for like big pharma, right? The Protection of Lawful, let's just call it the PLCAA, the Lawful Arms Act. that offers a huge amount of protection for all firearms manufacturers. If you look back just very recently when Mexico tried to sue Smith & Wesson for their... Mexico tried to say, well, Smith & Wesson is making firearms that are ending up in the cartels. That has nothing to do with Smith & Wesson. That has everything to do with illegal activity of people that shouldn't, that are already illegal and can't own firearms. It has nothing to do with the manufacturer. That's very important for us to secure and keep in place. It's not keeping these anti-gun groups from suing or you're presenting lawsuits. I think the Sandy Hook, didn't they sue Smith & Wesson, something like that? It still exists, but that Lawful Commerce Act is huge. It's very, very important for us to remember that there is another safeguard that exists. So again, both that protection of lawful commerce in Arms Act and decisions like Bruin act as a safeguard to where a lot of these anti-tobacco strategies, they kind of fail. A couple of these strategies, but they're still working hard with the same playbook, pushing against your 2A rights. Also, another huge benefit that we're seeing, I think we're up to 29 states now that do concealed carry or constitutional carry, which is great. That's more than half the country, which I believe more than half the country owns firearms, honestly. Somewhere around 100 million Americans own 500 million guns. Not enough. We need more. So there's a lot of people that understand the Second Amendment. There's decisions protecting the Second Amendment. There's already established law that keeps manufacturers from being sued of the misuse of their products. So there's some barriers there that we need to make sure stay there. They could be taken away just as easily as they were created. That's important to understand. We're going to get into how we do that a little bit later. Now, as far as the social media or the regular media, again, these big 2A groups, whether it be NRA or GOA or any of those other ones, they're pushing back hard on presenting pro-firearm content, which is great. That's something you need to be doing. We're going to talk about that here in a minute too. So a lot of this stuff is not one-sided, right? We're really pushing back on this anti-tobacco framework that's been created years and years ago. Another thing you really need to understand is, we'll talk about that in a minute. I don't want to do that right here because I don't want to surprise you with stuff I was going to share later. There are a lot of studies and things that are out there. John Lott, we've talked about him more than once on the show. He has these defensive use studies that have come out. The NRA posts stuff about that. The NSSF posts stuff about that. You should be posting stuff about his studies, by the way. You need to be looking it up. Crime Prevention Research Center.org, I think is what the website is. Also, one thing that the NSSF is doing, we talked about, I think this last week, actually, in the SAFE episode, is they Project Child Safe, where they've given out millions of gun locks to help firearms owners secure their firearms so kids don't get hurt. Yeah, it still happens. The number's way too high. But the industry isn't just ignoring this stuff and sweeping it under the carpet like maybe the tobacco industry did in the day. One thing I really hate talking about, because it's usually in the negative side, but just as it can be used as a weapon, it can be used as a tool, is lobbying. I complain a lot about the lobbying side of this country, and I hate lobbyists with all honesty. But sometimes the lobbyists are doing good things. They're fighting for good things. Pro-gun lobbying happens a lot. Again, I guess it would be a company, but groups that are funded by Bloomberg spend a lot of money trying to get rid of pro-gun legislators. Where lobbying on the other side, like the NRA, they outspent Bloomberg's groups almost 3 times. It was like $5.7 million that they raised. I think it was in 2022. Compared to Bloomberg, it was like 2.1 million or something like that. So there was a lot. Like, they were working really, really hard to keep these pro-gun legislators in office. I had the number after the decimal completely backwards. In 2024, if I would just refer to my notes, that's all that matters. In 2024, The lobbying groups like ILA, that's the NRA basically, they raised and spent $5.1 million to keep pro-2A legislators in office, where Bloomberg's homies, like Everytown and Moms Demand and those, spent $2.7 million. So there you go. I had the numbers kind of mixed up. Again, these constitutional carry law states are huge too. So let's keep this ball rolling. So what do you think? Are we winning the fight or are we losing the fight? I think I wouldn't say that we're winning, but we're definitely not losing. We're seeing a lot of great things happen as far as the securing the Second Amendment. We had some major opportunities that fell flat on their face, which I'm kind of pissed about. We talked about the Hearing Protection Act and the what was the other one? Short Act. They should have passed. They were there, but we still have squishy politicians. It is kind of frustrating. So I wouldn't say we're losing, but we're not winning by leaps and bounds. The reality is, with all these good organizations, these good 2A politicians, professors like John Lott producing great information, it's not up to them. It's not up to them solely, I should put it that way. Regular gun owners have to step up and have to start making their voices heard. That is the point of this podcast, is I want to present this information so it empowers you guys, all of you, to get out and do something. If the 100 million gun owners would get off their butts and make their voices heard, it'd be a lot different out there, I think. It's funny, as I was getting ready to start this next segment, I kind of was reading through my notes. And I thought of something. Maybe I'll start calling you guys this. I was going to say listeners, hey listeners, but my mind, or I was reading it out loud, came out Rangers. So maybe I'll start calling you guys Rangers. Sure, why not? Hey Rangers, this is where you guys come in. That sounds a little bit cheesy, but maybe we'll just roll with it. The everyday gun owner, you and me, we have to step up. We have to be more vocal and more active to make a huge difference. That's something that the tobacco industry didn't have, was a vast amount of energetic, knowledgeable people to stand up and say enough is enough. Gun owners have that ability. We have information at our fingertips. We have rallies. We have spaces on X. We have our social medias. We have ways to be heard. And we have to do that. We have to be more proactive than we ever have been before. And in order to make that happen, in order for you to be vocal, to be in their face, is you need information. You can't draw from an empty well. You need to know where to find the information. You need to, if you can, commit information to memory to fight back at every one of these tactics that are thrown up by the anti-gunners that are using the same tactics, again, as the anti-tobacco industry. We can do this. Again, you can't pull from an empty well, though. You have to start being proactive. I know some of you don't want to hear that. Some of you want to just sit on your laurels and just enjoy target shooting. We can't do that anymore. We have to be there. We have to move this forward. So here's a list of things that anybody, any average gun owner can do to fight back against this cookie cutter approach. So here we go. Number one, the first thing you can do is spot the public health epidemic spin. They always throw it out there, and they always will throw it out there. When you see like Everytown make the stupid post about the 46,000 gun deaths without any context, without referencing suicides, or without referencing the 500,000 to 3 million defensive gun uses every year, you know there's an agenda. You know they're spinning it out for a specific purpose, to generate fear, to demonize the gun and not the murderer, or in 60% of the case, the suicide victim. It's an agenda. So when we start spotting that, that's the first thing we can do. Now, how do we combat that? Just like I would just put out. If you're looking at I don't know, the FBI crime statistics, nerd out a little bit. It's under UCR, by the way. Look at the gun deaths. Look at the items being used to commit murders. Look at the suicide rates. Don't just listen to anti-gunners, because they're only going to spin out the information that makes their argument stronger, even though it's only partial truth. They don't want to share the whole truth with you because it ruins their argument. But again, by going to Crime Prevention Research Center, by going to the FBI reports, by looking at many other resources that are out there, other than the Gun Violence Archive, that is majorly left, and they spin every shooting into a mass shooting, by the way. That place is ridiculous because they also post the content and the police reports, and if you spent 2 seconds looking at the police reports, you're going to see a lot of those aren't mass shootings, aren't school shootings. They manipulate and share the data in a certain way to tug at your heartstrings, just like every other anti-gun group. It's not a public health epidemic. It's misinformation, and that's how you fight it. It's important to, if they ever make a post on whatever social media platform you're on, 99% of the times they turn off the comments. That's when you reshare it and make a comment. Call them on the carpet. Don't let them get away with it. Post statistics that are actually real, that are actually sourced, that are copied from the main source. Don't just find somebody else's comment on it and repost it or reshare it. That's lazy. Find the actual information out yourself. It's available and it's not hard to find. Call them on the carpet whenever they make this public health epidemic. It's retarded, is what it really is. Don't let them do it. It's laziness on their part, and it is extreme laziness on our part if we don't call them out. The second thing is to pay attention to when they try to say that there's deception in advertisement, that the gun lobby or the pro-gun groups are using deception to target children. Obviously, that's a lie. Chances are these kids have never seen any kind of firearms ads. You don't see them anywhere on TV, but you can see all sorts of drug ads anywhere you want, or boobs on any kind of social platform, but you can't see any kind of gun manufacturer. It's ridiculous. That targeting kids viewpoint, that is a anti-tobacco industry playbook. That's out of the playbook. They did the same thing, saying that they targeted children. Don't buy into it. It is so ridiculous and so thinly veiled that they push it all the time. That doesn't exist. I mentioned what they did to Daniel Defense after Uvalde, but there were groups going after the NRA's Eddie Eagle program, annoying as it may be, saying that was a veiled way to create extremist ideas into kids. Which, if you've seen the Eddie Eagle video, it's pretty obvious that I don't know how that would make guns sexy to children. It's pretty tacky and it's pretty cringe, but it doesn't generate extremist ideas in children. That's how they're creating these narratives, by saying that these big groups, pro-gun groups or manufacturers, are lying to our kids to make them violent. So what to look for? You might be perusing on your socials and you'll see something like some posts from these anti-gun groups saying that they're militarizing their children, or they're lying about the safety of their weapons. They always use the term weapon. I hate that term. It's a firearm. It's only a weapon if it's used as such. It's super frustrating. New York did their stupid public nuisance lawsuit, or they bring up red flag laws. There's all sorts of these things that the anti-gun groups are going to bring up to manipulate and deceive and create this negative connotation about any manufacturer. How do you fight back? Maybe find the ads if you can, share them, put them in the comment section, which you're not going to be able to, again, because they usually turn off the comment section. Share the ads, share the truth about these gun ads, show how they don't target these kids, but they target legal, lawful citizens. And there's nothing about glorifying war or anything like that, or murder. That doesn't exist in these claims. We know this. But it's important that other people who might be on the fence, who may not understand, they don't know. They just blindly believe and follow lies that are shared by the anti-guns. The other thing you can do, if maybe you're listening to regular radio, if you hear a group commenting negatively on a firearm, call them up. Not a big deal. Or call the radio station, maybe not necessarily the DJ. And if you hear some pro-gun information, tell them that you're grateful that they shared the truth. Or again, on the other side, let the radio manager guy know that you don't like what they're talking about. Your voice carries far more power than you may realize. The other thing you could do is reach out to whoever made the post. Maybe it's not an anti-gun group, but an individual. Reach out to them. I understand that a lot of these people are incapable of having a unbiased dialogue. Everybody has an agenda, it seems like, anymore. But if no conversation, if no dialogue happens, then there's never going to be any kind of positive change. That we need to be vocal. We just need to call these people on the carpet. You know, sometimes they say that the industry is irresponsible, or they have this protection. They referencing the Lawful Commerce Act, or Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. The big pharmaceutical companies have the same protection. I don't know how a company should be liable for the misuse of a product. We don't go after Ford for drunk drivers. We don't go after Budweiser for drunk drivers. We prosecute the drunk driver. That idea only exists with everything but the firearms industry. Like, the anti-gunners are stuck on demonizing firearms, just like they are demonized or had demonized tobacco and cigarette companies. The third thing you need to pay attention to as an average everyday gun owner are any kind of regulations that are being pursued, especially in your state. If something sounds kind of fishy, if there's safety or public health, any kind of that verbiage in a bill that's being presented in your state or city, you need to be vigilant. You need to dive into that bill and see exactly what's going on. We're seeing California, if you look at California or Washington, honestly, any of these major anti-gun states, pushing like ammunition tax or waiting periods, cool down periods, FOIA cards, all these things that have been put into place or are attempted to be putting into place. They all happen through regulation and rules presented by lawmakers. You need to be paying attention to that. You need to be listening and looking at the verbiage presented. It is very important. I think Colorado, the gun owners in Colorado would agree with this sentiment. We recently saw Colorado take a huge anti-gun shift with state legislation in a state that was predominantly pro-2A for a very, very long time. And I think still is, other than some of the big population centers. We're seeing a shift in Idaho, if you live in the state, whether you like it or not, it's happening. Look at Washington and Oregon, Utah. Like, wherever population changes in the big dense areas, it manipulates the laws for the entire state. That's just the way it works. Pay attention to those things that are being presented. Again, some of the words they'll put out are like sin tax or public safety or anti-harm. These words that they're phrases that are commonly associated as a kind of a backdoor way to manipulate firearms ownership. Pay attention to those words. How do we fight back against this kind of stuff? Well, I already kind of shared it. Be vocal, be loud, be respectful, but you need to be involved. Some of the bigger groups on the social media side anyways, these major 2A organizations, they are pretty good about pointing things out and calling legislators and lawmakers on the carpet, or even governors at the state level. They're usually pretty good at it. Don't forget to follow any of these organizations or become members of these organizations. That's important. The other thing we can do is go to city council meetings, go to, what are they called? Commissioner meetings. Any way we can get involved in our local and state lawmaking procedures. That's key. If you don't know who your state representative is, call the state capitol. Tell them where you live. They'll give you that information. Chances are, if you're on any kind of social media, you could probably hunt down that same person's profile on pretty much every social media platform. Maybe not TikTok, but X or Facebook or Instagram. You'll probably find your state legislator as on the profile there as as an individual. Or again, you can call your state house and they'll find that information. If it comes to the federal level, if you don't know, call the Senate hotline, the switchboard. I don't remember the number offhand, but I'll post it up here. You can be involved. It's okay. In fact, the system is meant to function that way. It says right in the preamble of the Constitution, we the people. It's us. We're the ones that are meant to get involved and to tell our representatives how we want laws to be enacted. Being a sideliner, a fence sitter, or apathetic just won't work anymore. That's what happened in all these red states that immediately turned purple or deep, deep blue, and they lost their gun rights because they said it won't happen here. That'll never happen here. We're too a minded state. That mindset will lose you or your kids or your grandkids their Second Amendment rights. Get involved. Get very active. Be proactive, and hold your lawmakers, especially at the state level, hold them responsible. That is your job, to make sure that they do their job. Also, don't forget, there's always state rallies. There's always ways to get involved and to make your voice heard. It may not just have to be with your legislator. It could be with just posting a post on your social media. Just be vocal. Be vocal and vigilant about it. Step number 4. This we see all the time. The media manipulation. Don't fall for anything that tugs at your heartstrings. We kind of mentioned this before. The anti-gun lobby, the anti-gun groups, they coordinate and they generate these heart-tugging, sad, awful stories about violence, how they lost their child in a school shooting, something like that. They make the gun owner into this terrible, horrible person. Some cases, yeah, they are, if it's a murder. But they always kind of skew the regular gun owner as a bad person because they own guns. These heart-tugging, manipulative ads are out of the same anti-tobacco playbook. By demonizing gun owners, or by, I call it coffin surfing, I guess that would be grandstanding, shilling off of the graves of those who died in some kind of event. They're always manipulating you at the heartstrings. Honestly, we are being manipulated every day. Every time we turn on the radio, every time we turn on the internet, anytime you watch a YouTube video, you're being manipulated. But I don't manipulate you. I love you. And you should help me hit my goal of 1,000 subs. Anyway, that tactic has been used, or was used, by the anti-tobacco campaign from the 60s all the way up to the late 90s. They did their best to demonize and manipulate society into seeing an item as something gross and disgusting and despicable. They are doing that right now with guns. What you need to be looking for, whether it's on social media or anywhere else, you're going to hear words like end gun violence. You might see that in a hashtag or something like that, even though hashtags are dying. Those are telltale signs of being manipulated and trying to tug at your heartstrings. They'll talk about these terrible, tragic events, which are statistically very low, but they're not going to talk about the 100 million safe gun owners out there in the United States. Honestly, if 100 million gun owners were the issue, or if the guns caused the issue and there were 100 million gun owners out there, I think the problem would be much, much bigger, right? It should be statistically, but obviously it's not the gun. It's the individual who wants to use a tool to cause harm. So how do you fight back against the media manipulation? Post good, positive firearms content. There is a lot out there, or make your own positive firearms content. Talk about a trip you had to the range that was a good time, or maybe you took your family, your wife or spouse to the range. Maybe it was a hunting trip that was a fabulous trip that all involved safe gun use. There's a lot of funny and entertaining content out there that's not really probably the best thing to share. It's probably not safe gun use. Create your own. Make good, positive content. Talk about the amount of safe gun use that happens every year. Defensive gun use. Somewhere between 500,000 and 3 million defensive gun uses every year. Some of those don't include pulling the trigger, by the way. Safe gun use happens millions of times a day. Safe gun use. Not even defensive gun use. Safe gun use. Millions of times. Do I have a statistic to back that up? No, but it's probably a pretty safe estimate. Maybe talk about the 29 states that have constitutional carry and how, oddly, crime went down in some of these states. Weird. Maybe you can talk about a class that you took, a concealed carry class or a rifle class, something. Even if it's a first aid class, talk about a good, positive experience. Share that with your friends on social media. It's okay. I've mentioned this before. We need to make firearms ownership positive again. We need to show how many people, I know they say 100 million Americans own guns. I bet that number is a little bit higher, but people don't want to talk about what they have. It's just kind of a lot of gun owners don't say how many guns they have. Somebody asks me, I don't tell them how many guns I have. It's really none of their business. But we just need to be vocal about positive, good, responsible firearms ownership. We need to be sharing that content way, way more. Step 5 is we really, really need to follow the money. This is a big deal. Most anti-gun groups boil down to Bloomberg. He has millions and millions of dollars that he's set aside to attack your Second Amendment rights. Groups like Everytown or some of these others that are funding these studies, they all come down to one source of money. Usually it's Bloomberg. Not all the time. I'm not just going to throw Mr. Bloomberg under the bus. But that happens. That same tactic or that same thing could have been used back in the day with the anti-tobacco. Most of the money came from one place. We just need to follow the money. All right, what to look for. If you see ads or whatever come up or studies that have come out, look to see who funded these studies. Look to see who's publishing this content. Chances are it's going to funnel back to one group. And identify that. Show that. If something comes up, if you see a study, dive into it, see who's published it, post that information, reshare that study and say, hey, this came from Everytown who is funded by Bloomberg. Boom. If people start seeing that it's one main group that's forcing the same narrative across the board, it might help open their eyes. Also, when it comes to following the money, you probably should be supporting some kind of pro 2A group, whether it be national or on the state level. If you can afford both, do both. It's usually less than a cup of coffee a day. You could probably spare that. For me, it's a rock star a day. I could probably spare that, and my waist and my brain show it. It's important for us to be creating and fighting these laws. Let's put it this way, is really expensive. We talked about the lobby, right? It gets very, very expensive. And participating and funding these organizations that are fighting for your rights, it's greatly appreciated. I wish I could donate millions of dollars to these groups. If I had millions, I totally would. But I don't. I'm just a simple podcaster. Be a part of a group and be vocal. Here's kind of a pro tip for you. Create a network. Create a network of gun owners, whether it be at your local range or your neighbor, whatever. Create a network of like-minded pro 2A folks around you. When one person starts to share and verbalize, if you're in a group like that, it gives courage to other folks. The other nice thing about getting involved and creating a network is you hear things through these groups that you may not have seen or heard otherwise. When we have a lot of ears listening and paying attention to these anti-gun tactics, then we can also mobilize and create a group that fights back against them. Networking is key with everything, obviously, whether it be in business or your neighborhood or whatever, it's good to have a group of like-minded people around you, because there is strength in numbers for sure. And likewise, when you're in a group and you see these tactics, these same tactics used years ago against the tobacco industry, point them out, help your other homies at the range recognize and see and participate against these same programs to help proliferate the Second Amendment. Rangers, I kind of like that. Maybe I'll keep using that. Rangers, this isn't about keeping your rifle for hunting. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. It's about keeping the Second Amendment alive. It's about identifying these nasty tactics used years ago to demonize and criticize tobacco users and the industry, to turn firearms into something gross and socially unacceptable. But we have something that tobacco companies never had. The Constitution behind us, hundreds of millions of gun owners that are like-minded and have a voice, and the desire to keep our freedom free. That is it. That right there should be enough to push back against these tactics. The industry is doing what it can with things like the Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. I can't ever get that right. And decisions coming out of the Supreme Court like Bruin, and outspending the anti-gun lobbies 2-1, almost 3-1. But as much as they're doing, as hard as they're working, they really, really can't do it alone. We have to get involved. We have to be more active in defending our liberty. One day, if we lose it, our kids are going to ask us, or our grandkids will ask us what happened. And I think they'll hold us responsible. And they should hold us responsible. I hope it never comes to that. It won't if we do our part. We just have to do it. We have to be there. And every gun owner should be involved. Every gun owner. Whether you have one shotgun that used to be your grandpa's, or you have safes or a vault full of firearms. This fight is every gun owner's fight. I've mentioned this before. In my state alone, apparently there was about 100,000 sportsmen. A huge percentage of these would be gun owners, and some around 10 million nationwide that didn't participate in the election. That 10 million, that's a lot of votes. These people, if you are a gun owner, you need to be more active in defending the Constitution and our Second Amendment rights. This really is a liberty issue, and it doesn't stop at the Second Amendment. We should be this active about all of our rights. This is a huge, huge deal. When you see some ridiculous story about the gun violence epidemic, call them out. Call them on the carpet and tell them to post their sources, and then you post the same, like, good information, real information. When you hear about companies or organizations trying to sue firearms manufacturers or distributors, call them out. Talk about the Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. There are ways to protect these rights, these manufacturers. Don't let them get away with it. That's how the tobacco lobby lost, because they allowed the manipulation, the demonizing, and the owning of the airwaves, basically, to create this negative narrative around tobacco. Again, it may have that problem. I don't know. I don't smoke. But I know guns aren't the issue. But they're working the exact same playbook as they did from the 60s to the 90s and now, to demonize you and the tools that you enjoy as guaranteed, as a part of a guaranteed right that we should all be able to keep and bear arms. It's a game. It's a game that we can't let them win. When they like to share the 46 million lives lost without sharing the total information, remind them of the 500,000 to 3 million defensive gun uses every year. Again, you can find that information from John Lott, the Crime Prevention Research Center. He did a great study on that. You really should familiarize yourself with that information. All the resources are out there. You just have to find the information. You don't even have to memorize it. You just got to know where to find it. That in itself is a huge, huge win to deceptive practices. This really is about our way of lives as Americans. It's about enjoying those hunting trips with your kids or grandkids. It's about keeping your family safe. It's about fighting back from against tyranny. It's not as something as trivial and silly as a cigarette. This is about freedom. This is about liberty. And we should treat it with the utmost importance as a gun owner. We are all to be involved in this fight. We can't let the anti-gunners win through lies and manipulation. We can win this. We are winning this. And it has to be fought by every gun owner in America. Let's keep the Second Amendment untouchable, undefeatable, and for everyone. Well, Rangers, I really think I'm going to use that more often. Well, Rangers, that's it. That's the show. Hopefully, this information helps you spot these anti-gun tactics, to see the history and how they're recycling them. And it motivates you to fight back. You don't need a law degree. You don't need a megaphone or anything really loud. You already have everything that you need. You have your freedom, you have your passion for the Second Amendment, and you have your voice. Put those things together and fight back. You can do this. We can do this. If you like what I shared, make sure you like and comment and do all the things that if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, like, share, comment, do all those things. If you're listening on a podcast platform, give us a good rating, follow along, maybe hit the notifications and a good comment. All these things are free for you, but they really do help me a lot. I didn't mention this before. I tried to mention this early in the show, but I have a goal to hit 1,000 subs this year. If you could help me out, that would be great. We're more than halfway through the year, and I'm a long ways away from that 1,000 goal. Help me out. That would be fantastic. It doesn't cost you anything. If you want to head to the Range Minded Podcast website, rangemindedpodcast.com, you can find patches there. I've debated on the selling targets. It might happen. Eventually, I got some t-shirts that I want to sell there too. We'll see. I'm having some issues with the website stuff. So make sure if you bought a patch and you haven't got it, please jump to my social media. I'm almost always on X, and send a message there. I've noticed there's some issues with my store on the website that I really don't like. And I might have to change hosting platforms again just to try and fix those issues. So if you bought a patch, let me know. Don't lie to me. I don't like liars. But if you're honest and you can prove that you bought a patch, we'll figure it out. Don't forget, the Second Amendment is only one election away from being lost. Your rights matter. Your voice matters. Share your passion for the Second Amendment. Share your love for your freedom and your rights. It's important that we vocalize and share that passion with others around us. That's why I always say take somebody shooting, because it's important. Love you guys. Stay range-minded, and we'll see you later, Rangers. See you guys.
First time.